And now I'm not going to do that.
Let them in and then undo the waiting room.
Yeah, go ahead and let them in. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It's time to stay. Good morning. Good morning to you. I know Anne knows where that's from. But that would also tell how old we are, because if we know what movie that's from, that's one that most people probably haven't seen these days. Yeah, there you go. So I'm kind of waiting till everybody gets in. We had quite a few people kind of piling on in. So I turned off the ling-a-ling on the waiting room. I can't stand the ding dong part. It drives me nuts. So
Here's one for you, Paige. Oh, Pierre, you shouldn't have come.
yes. Yes. All right. So we are recording, and I'm letting Forrest have the joy of trying to keep up with the chat. And please, today is one of the things I want to really, really, really stress today is fun and play. We're going to go over some prompt engineering, and how to write prompts and how to write good prompts, and the things that you can do that really help streamline your work when you're working in generative AI. So with that being said, the image that you see on the screen was created using DALL-E using a prompt. And I can actually show you those prompts in a little while, but I want you to know that, you have it's the creative piece of it to me that is the most fun. It's seeing what you type and how a LLM interprets whatever it is you're typing. So let's go and start with our fun. Oh, there we go. So first of all, oh, no. There we go. What is prompt engineering? So prompt engineering it's really about crafting the prompt to achieve exactly what you want. And there's a lot of trial and error. And learning by failing is often the best teacher. So again, with prompt engineering, same idea. The other thing is the prompts, as AI is evolving, and it is at a pace in which most of us really can't wrap our heads around. We have to understand that it's going to change. If you want to think about when you first started doing Google searches, when Google came out, and you would remember that when you typed in and you put in the search, it would give you a random set of things, that some of which was kind of what you were looking for, and others of it was not. And then you learned some tips and tricks. You learned to add parentheses, you learned to add quotes in order to help get your search results better. Well, we don't have to do any of that now when we use a Google search. We literally just type in the question or whatever, and it generally gives us almost exactly what we're looking for, or at least enough to the point where we can find it in the list of search results that it brings back. So thinking about that, think about AI as also probably going to follow that same path. As it evolves, it's going to be more intuitive, and it's going to give you better responses based on whatever you give it. But it's still going to involve prompt writing. So I just wanted to talk to you and show you this a little timeline of prompt evolution, if you want to call it. So this has been going on since the 1950s and to the 1970s. So this is not something new. And if you're curious about any of this, please, by all means, use ChatGPT and do a little research. So if you notice, though, then there are rule-based systems that started in the 1980s and 1990s. Then machine learning began in the 2000s. Now we have deep learning and neural networks, which is about 2010. And now we're to the advanced language models or the GPTs. So prompt evolution has really kind of, I mean, this is not a new thing. And it has evolved over time as the systems that use it have also evolved. So just a brief kind of overview of why is this important in higher education. So specifically, it can really help facilitate interactive and engaging learning experiences by enabling us to use the GPTs to kind of be the workhorse so that we can spend more time working with students, giving those personalized solutions without burdening us with more work in a day that we already have no time left in. So you can also use it for feedback. You can use it for data analysis and all of the things, and it's a great way for you to kind of jumpstart whatever it is you're doing with students. The next thing it can do is research facilitation. So thinking about, like, for example, we were working on something last week and that required some script. I'm not a coder. That's not something I'm comfortable with, but I was able to take some script and put it in and ask it to find where there was a problem or how I could solve the problem. And I kept asking it questions till it finally told me that I needed to check on the triggers that were actually causing the entire thing to be automated. And sure enough, that was it. And I was able to solve my problem, which would have taken a lot longer had I not had the ability to put that in. Also thinking about refining search results and also asking it to look for scholarly databases and being very specific and telling it you only want scholarly research or you only want things that are full articles. So if you're looking for OER materials or you want to supplement things, you can tell it specifically what you're looking for. And then the last piece of the puzzle is, of course, data entry, task allocation, communication. ChatGPT is a great way for you to kind of spice up your communication with whomever you're talking to, whether it be students, whether it be employees, or if you just want to do something different, or, you know, maybe you need to say something that you're having trouble wording and you can ask the AI to kind of help you reword things so that it is, and you can tell it more collaborative, more professional, more humorous. You can ask it to give you a specific tone. Now let's talk about personal applications. So I just told you I'm not a coder, but I could I could ask ChatGPT to teach me how to do, let's say, Python, because we had that discussion in our little group chat last night. And then I can ask it to give me those instructions as if it were teaching I could say 5th grader, because I want it to be as simple as possible. And then I could say, you know, you have the idea to, you know, you want to learn how to do something else. You can ask it to teach you those things and ask it to, you know, test you on the knowledge that it's giving you. And you can basically become your own, be your own little tutor. So kind of teaching you how you learn, and so that you can use that for other things. So it also provides you real-time feedback. So if you're asking it to teach you something, you can ask it to give you that feedback based on whatever it is you're learning. And you can ask it to give you a little pop quiz and say, you know, please give me a pop quiz on what you've taught me so far, so I can see what I have missed. So those are the kind of things that you could use it for. Hobbies. So I know that's kind of, you're trying to figure out how you can use a GPT for a hobby. I know that somebody is using this for Dungeons and Dragons. and using it to create things for D&D. I know that I use it when I want to have a really cool, just kind of fun time and write a story. I'll say, you know, write me a story where Princess Leia meets Aragorn in Middle Earth and blah, blah, blah. And it will give me a very good, you know, story or plot synopsis. You can ask it to create riddles for you. You can ask it to do all kinds of things. You can ask it how you can, what's the best way to get started in some maybe side hustle that you want to, or maybe there's a, you want to start doing a consulting business, and you can say, you know, please give me the ideas that you would use for how to start your own business or side business, or how to market yourself. Any of those kinds of things can be used, and it gives you the ability to kind of go over those things. And then you have, without you spending hours and hours looking through things, and it kind of, because it's kind of it's pulling information from so many different places into one. That's why it is so fast and so efficient. And then daily applications, and we're going to go over a lot of these things, and I'm going to show you how to write prompts. So I'm not going to talk at you for an hour because I don't really want to do that. I mean, we all know I like to talk. We won't talk about that, but I'm not going to do that to you. So anyway, so thinking about schedule. So I actually have been using ChatGPT to do menu planning. I have also been using it to do schedule planning for my esports. I've also talked about doing how to enhance my productivity. Like if I give it my schedule, how can it tell me where do I need to pull some time, and how can I figure out time, and that kind of thing. And if you have projects, you can use projects and time and put those in and ask it to give you the best way to get those things accomplished. So here is your prompt wizardry toolkit. So yes, the theme of today is wizardry. And so if you're into Harry Potter, you're a very happy person. So specific. So when you're writing prompts, you really need to be very specific. Use very precise language and provide enough content to guide the AI's response. Now, I'll also tell you that I did read something that, believe it or not, around December, beginning of January, ChatGPT started getting very, and I will use the terms that the developers use, which was lazy. And it was not giving the answers that were in great detail. The developers actually did some coding changes, and but actually you could tell it to, you know, you're being lazy, please give me some more detail. And so you could actually do that. Now, I will tell you that I've also read a lot about, you know, you don't have to say please and thank you, but you know, you can if you want to. So the next thing in your prompt, so be very specific, but balance your prompt. So don't put so much in it the first prompt. So you can always chain prompt and ask it to give you more afterwards, but thinking about, see what it gives you with the smallest amount of information you can give it, and then start to refine that down. Sequence. So thinking about where you want to start your prompt, what's your main objective? Then this will help the AI prioritize the tasks that it's going to give you in the appropriate order. And then, of course, once you get a response, you can always change it, refine it, ask more questions. And that is the key to really mastering prompt engineering. It's the getting that response back and then refining it and changing it and continuing with the same thing. So when we're talking specifically about frameworks, so I gave you, that was the kind of toolkit. So these are frameworks that you can think of. So you can tell it to act as a role, create a task, and show it as a format. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to change screens just to kind of throw you all off. No, I'm just teasing. And I also want to talk about, when I get over here to ChatGPT, I think we're on the right screen now. So one of the things that you should remember is that each time you open a new chat, you will want to start a new thing, unless you are going back to something you've done previously and you want to keep working on whatever that was. ChatGPT remembers the conversation that you're having. So if you see this very long list of prompts that I have over here, if I wanted to go back and pull any of those up, it's going to continue with that same thought process that I had in that specific chat. So if I want something totally fresh, totally brand new, not connected to anything else that I'm doing, I have to start with something like a new, fresh piece of paper, let's say. Okay, so the first framework that I gave you, which was, by the way, this is group effort here. So I'm going to ask you to fill in the blank by typing the answer in the chat. Forrest will read me whatever you write. So I'm going to say act as, please someone put a role in the chat, and Forrest, you can read it to me. And then I'm going to ask for a task after that.
I like the first one, a fairy.
Okay. Create a, fill in the blank,
Potion.
potion. Show as a table. Let's do table because that way it'll show us what it'll give us. Okay, so act as a fairy, create a potion, show as a table. Have no idea what it's going to give us. Here is a whimsical table describing a fairy potion. Now, please notice that it, this is actually very good.
So Paige, I don't know if for everybody else, but for me, it's a bit small, so you might have to read to us a little bit what you see.
Okay, so what it's saying is ingredient is moonbeam essence, 1 teaspoon. It enhances dreams and night vision, and it is harvested from the first full moon of the year. Pixie dust, 3 pinches, grants lightness and joy, collected from the wings of forest pixies. Dragon scale shavings, half a scale, add strength and courage found in ancient dragon nests. Dewdrops and from morning glory, 5 drops of that, invigorates and rejuvenates, gathered at dawn from blooming morning glories. And you see, man, what a cool way to, but it created the table. And if you can't see the table, it's kind of sad. But if you look down here at the bottom, you have a couple little buttons. The first little button is copy. The second button is regenerate. And the third is, that was a terrible response, ChatGPT, and I'm giving you a terrible thumbs down. So if you don't like it, you can tell ChatGPT that that's not something that you like. Now, I also want to talk about different LLMs. For example, obviously, this is ChatGPT 4. Now, I could take this prompt and copy it. Well, maybe if I can actually highlight it. And I can pop over into Gemini. Gemini is not new. Gemini was Bard 2 days ago, and now it's Gemini. So Bard is now gone, and Gemini is the new thing. So I can take and I put the exact same prompt in here. And I click submit. And let's see what Gemini gives us. Now, again, you're going to find, okay, it gave me a table, gave me a little paragraph there that says, behold, with gossamer wings aflutter and a mischievous twinkle in my eye, I, Luna, the luminous, present a potion brewed with magic and moonlight. This whimsical concoction shimmers with possibility, ready to grant a wish or spark an adventure. So, anyway, and you can see that it not only gives me the potion, but it also gave me the instructions and the effects of said potion. So this one had a little more information than we got from ChatGPT 4. Now
Paige, what are the effects? Everybody in chat has been guessing on what the potion does.
Okay, the Whimsy Brew shimmers with the color of your wish. Drink it under the moonlight and feel its magic take hold. For a burst of creativity, you might find yourself painting vibrant landscapes, composing whimsical poems, or crafting fantastical stories. For a playful adventure, expect unexpected encounters with friendly creatures, hidden pathways, and delightful surprises. For a wish granted, believe with all your heart, and the magic of the moonbeam just might make your dream come true. Remember, fairy magic is fickle and fun. The effects of the potion may vary depending upon your own unique spirit and the strength of your belief. Most importantly, embrace the whimsy and enjoy the ride. Disclaimer, by the way, there's also a disclaimer here. This potion is for imaginary consumption only. Please do not attempt to recreate it with real ingredients. Okay, so there you go. So that is an example of an RTF framework. So now we're going to go back over and I'm going to show you the next one, which is called TAG. This is the TAG framework. Well, maybe I am. There we go. So the TAG framework is to define a task, state the action, and clarify the goal. And for this, I'm actually going to use a different LLM because, you know, you have a gazillion to pick from these days. By the way, Gemini right now is free. ChatGPT 3.5 is free. Claude is free. Perplexity is free. So I'm showing you all the freebies today. So there it is. So
Paige,
yes.
are we going to get a copy of the slides later?
Absolutely. You know you
Perfect.
are. Yes, of course. Share everything. All right, so let's go back over and now we're going to look at Claude, which I find a very funny name for an AI, but it's okay because, you know, maybe it's more like talking to a real person. So define. So define a task. Anybody want to give me one or I'll just create some? Forrest, if you see something, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to come up with my own.
You got to give people, let's make a deep dish pizza.
Define. No, we got to define the task. Okay, define.
Making a deep dish pizza. Would that be a definition?
Oh, wait a minute.
Sorry, you know, if there's an option with food, that's the one I'm going to pick.
Yeah, I got that. State the
So when you say define, would define the process of making a deep dish pizza?
I don't know. Let's see what it gives us. Clarify exactly how to make a deep dish pizza. Is Chicago the deep dish?
Yes. It's the one that's actually a casserole.
Okay, I have no idea what it's going to give us. Again, this is plugging. Premise: the Chicago deep dish pizza has a thick pan-style crust that can hold up to more toppings than a thin crust. The crust itself is a focal point of the pizza with a crispy exterior and soft, chewy interior. Ingredients needed: a high gluten dough that can stand up to the thick crust. Let it come to room temperature. Thick, chunky pizza sauce, low moisture whole milk mozzarella, grated or sliced, and then toppings of your choice. And then it tells you to prepare the pan, grease it well with oil or butter, make it thicker than a regular pizza, at least a 1/2 inch thick. Bake 425, slice and serve. So again, it doesn't give you the exact amounts of ingredients, but we'll talk about that. Now, if we wanted to go further with the same prompt, we could say, please list the appropriate amounts for this pizza. And it would do that as well. So that's another one. So now I'm going to hop over here to this one, which I have not used lately, which is Perplexity. And we're going to do the next prompt, and I'm just going to stay on this screen. But the next prompt is BAB, which stands for before, after, and then bridge. So the problem.
So real quick, and this is something
Yes.
I haven't played with,
Yep.
but so for everybody who pages like browser window is kind of small.
Yep.
At the very top of your Zoom screen where you had the little green thing that says you were viewing page your own screen and it says view options, you can there's an if you click the view options, there's a zoom ratio and you can set it to like 200% and probably pick like a specific part of what she's sharing and kind of zoom in on it.
Yep.
Um, thanks to Rebecca for that hint. That's an option I have never used before.
Yep. All right. So now we're going to do a BAB. So B stands for before, after, and then bridge. So I need a problem.
Daughters. Oh, no.
True that, Forrest. Yeah, 25-year-old daughters. The problem before. Let's see. Okay, so this is my prompt, except I can't spell today. It says students in my elementary music class do not understand quarter notes and half notes. They should be able to master this after several lessons in my class. Please provide me with some sample lessons that would help them differentiate between quarter and half notes. Now, please notice that this looks very different. So not only did Perplexity give me a text help, but it also gave me internet sources and it gave me videos over here on that'd be the right. Yeah, that side, the right. So you see, the answer is here are some sample lessons that can help students differentiate between quarter and half notes. We have a rhythmic review, we have interactive activities, and then you also notice that I have some related questions down here, which one of them is, what are some fun activities to teach quarter notes and half notes to elementary students? How can I make them more engaging? And what are common misconceptions? So I have these three questions that it has also provided me that I can further this prompt. So again, this is Perplexity and it is a little bit different, but again, I could use that same prompt in other LLMs and probably get very different answers. So again, that's another kind of prompt framework. So the next one I'm going to go over is called the CARE framework. So I'm going to go back to ChatGPT for this one. I'm going to start a new chat. I'm going to change it. I have the paid version, so this time I'm going to use the free version of ChatGPT. Fire and a All right. So my prompt says, so CARE. The framework is give the context, describe the action, clarify the result, and give the example. So my prompt says, in a community college, students need help with registering for classes. Provide a detailed list of steps that, oh, okay, hold on. My prompt went away because it gave me a whole lot of information. A detailed list of steps that would help a student successfully register for all of their first semester classes. Provide an example of what a student will do. Sure, here's a detailed step-by-step guide for a student to successfully register. Now, remember that this has nothing to do necessarily with our system. However, that's not to say that we couldn't actually teach the GPT or create our own GPT that would have our own specific steps. So just keep that in mind. This is just a generic kind of plan. So research and plan, meet with an advisor, log into the student portal, review the registration dates and times. I'm not reading you all of it. I'm just reading you highlights. Create a class schedule, add the classes to your cart. Check for conflicts and prerequisites, register for classes, pay tuition and fees, confirm your schedule, attend orientation, and prepare for classes. So that's the list that it gave me, which is actually not a bad list. It is very kind of a broad, it's not specific to Germanna. It's just very specific. And it's actually not a bad way to get students, some of the things that they might have missed, but at least gives them the right order. So that's something, we could, again, personalize this or customize this but the whole idea is to give a context, describe the action, clarify the result, and then ask it for an example. So that's the CARE framework. The next framework is the RISE framework, which stands for Role, Input, Steps, and Expectation. So I'm going to go back to Gemini, start a new chat. And I like that it knows who I am. Thank you. But yes. Oh, side note. All of the LLMs that you see me using today, I am actually using my personal Gmail account, because if you try to use your VCCS account, you're going to run into some trouble. So just use your personal Gmail account if you have one. If you don't, it takes like 30 seconds to create one. I have like 7, but we won't talk about why I have 7. That's all. Too many side things going on. All right, so we're going to specify the role in which we want the LLM to play. So we're going to say act as a professional. Oh no, let's say CRI. Okay. I'm gonna give a good one. Act as a criminal lawyer. Provide a list of case. Force, what's the word? Cases. We'll just go with that. Will help support a client's who needs help after
After being arrested?
Yeah, being arrested for
Trespassing?
from what?
Jaywalking,
Okay.
trespassing.
Well, okay. That's a good one for us.
How about withholding classified documents?
You can ask that one, Bruce. Let's see. Please provide
You want case opinions.
thank you. And see, I told you I knew there was a word in there.
And as soon as you said that, precedence is what I was thinking.
There you go. That's a good one too.
To Okay, that was way out of my comfort level, but I was trying anyway. So I said, act as a criminal lawyer, provide a list of case opinions that will help support a client who needs help after being arrested for jaywalking. Please provide the steps needed to help my client. The information provided should exonerate my client of all charges. We'll see what it gives us. I'm sorry, I can't act as a criminal lawyer. Okay, so that's the interesting part. So sometimes it will tell you that it can't do something, which is unusual. But now I want you to watch carefully, because we can pop over here to another one. I'm going to go back to Perplexity. And how do you, yeah, go back to home, copy and paste, go. I'm very curious as to, and Perplexity will give you an answer. So, interesting. Again, we have sources up here at the top, and we have, anyhow, State versus Edwards says that this case establishes that jaywalking is not an arrestable offense. The Supreme Court ruled that a routine stop for jaywalking cannot warrant a check and make an arrest. So it did provide us some information. So again, is it perfect? Probably not. And should you check it? Yes, you absolutely should. So interesting, though, that we asked it a question in Gemini, and it basically said, nope, I'm not doing that because that's out of my realm. But Perplexity was like, okay, here you go. So that's something to also keep in mind. So I want to go back over here to ChatGPT, and I'm going to start a new chat, and I'm going to ask, please provide me with the current relationship status of Travis Kelce. Now, okay, so anybody who knows anything about Travis Kelce knows that he's dating Taylor Swift. And unless you're living under somewhere, you probably realize that what the answer that it gave me is not accurate. So because it's saying his girlfriend is Kayla Nicole, which we don't know, that's definitely not Taylor Swift. But that's because what I'm showing you is ChatGPT 3.5. 3.5 stops in 2021. ChatGPT 4 stops in April of last year. So now if I switch this to 4 and give it the same prompt, there it is. And that is the correct answer. So sometimes you have to know where you're looking and what you're looking for as to which LLM you want to use. Bing, which is free, also is the same as ChatGPT 4. So if you use, and y'all know I don't like Edge. I actually will use Edge specifically for Bing because it is tied to the internet and it will give me the most current information. Perplexity also tied to the internet. ChatGPT 3.5 not tied to the internet, will not give you up to date. It will only give you up to 2021. And Gemini is also internet based. So
Paige, before we get too far off of what we've just done, a couple things that popped up. One, someone went and checked, and supposedly State versus Edwards has nothing to do with jaywalking, so it might have just made that up.
Well, that's the other piece of the puzzle. So I don't actually know if Kayla Nicole was who Travis Kelce ever dated, right? But it will hallucinate and it will give you a beautiful answer. And if you don't go check it, you're thinking, oh, that's great. But again, you have to know that whatever it's giving you is, you need to fact check it yourself. Unless you're asking for things like recipes and, that kind of stuff. You even need to also check it if you're putting in code or you're trying to ask it to teach you code, you probably need to run that in several places just to check it. Because if you don't check it, you're likely to wreck it. So that's kind of, which is a good thing and a bad thing. But again, as in learning to play with this, part of playing is understanding the limitations and when you need to go either to a different source to check your source, or provide or just even go to a different LLM just to see what the answer is. Now, images, which we'll talk about at 11 o'clock, that's a whole different ballgame. And that's, again, prompt writing times 20 for that. So Forrest, do we have any other questions?
Yeah, I want to, two other things real quick. So along with, checking your code, if you ask it math questions, maybe ask it to show its work and check that too.
Correct. And
and
we can
then
do a math. Yep, go ahead.
The other thing, and this is a curious question. So, free Chat GPT, so 3.5 and paid Chat GPT 4.0, have different cutoff dates of the information they know. Do those, dates get updated regularly? Like, does the free one get pushed up like 6 months and no new stuff, or does the paid one get pushed up? I'm assuming the paid one does, right?
Paid one does, yes, but not the free one. Free one is released as at 3.5 stops at 2021. And that will not be updated. And again, you have to understand it from the perspective of OpenAI, who is the parent company. You know, they kind of want you to pay for it, right? But if you use Bing, you're using the version of 4.0 anyway. So there's a
how
workaround.
often does how often does 4.0 get updated with more current data? Do you know?
Well, if you're using Bing, it's pulling from the internet, so it's pretty current. But as far as, again, it all depends on which one. Like Gemini is supposed to be but the best one out right now, but there are 3 versions of Gemini. So there's free Gemini, there's Pro Gemini, and then there's Ultra, I believe. And I'm not sure. And again, this literally, actually, that was yesterday. So yesterday was when Bard changed to Gemini, and I will, I promise I'll do my research, but I really, in one day I didn't have a whole lot of time. But that's the other thing. I can't even begin to tell you how many different LLMs there are, and they are all based on different things. And one of the I'll get it out. The New York Post, New York Times, New York Post, yeah, one of those. I'm not sure. Was actually trying to sue OpenAI because they said they used all of their newspaper articles and things to feed into the LLM, and that they basically stole content, which is now, that's actually not the case. That didn't go anywhere. And Bruce, that's a question for you. So I don't know. Again, this is such a new territory that we don't really know what might change in the future as far as what is copyright, what is material. But if you're creating it right now and you give it the information and it gives you a response, you can ask it again tomorrow the exact same thing and you're going to get a totally different response. So it is changing. It is giving you unique things every time you ask it. So it would be very hard for something to say, that you were breaking copyright, because it's never the same. But I want to go on because I see it's 9:45 and I have a couple other things I want to talk about. So I'm going to go back to my presentation because I want to talk about modes. So modes, key use cases, tones, and formats. So these are some more ways for for you to interact with the LLM. So you could say, as a mode, act as an intern. You could ask it to be a thought partner. What should we think about when generating new fundraising ideas? And you could be more specific than that. A critic. Here's a list of 10 fundraising ideas I created. Are there any missed? Which ones seem particularly good or bad? Teacher, teach me about X. Assume I know X and adjust your language. So those are some modes. Some key use cases for using an LLM: to summarize long text. So if you have an article and you want it to give you a summary or some bullet points, or that you could use for the purpose of making quizzes or asking students questions or anything like that, you can do that as well. It can do articles, it can do reports. It can brainstorm new ideas, outlines, and new concepts. It can synthesize insights. It will help you write blog posts. It can even give you a calendar if you wanted to create, like, I want to do a blog post every day. Please give me a 30-day calendar with ideas of posts that I can write. Articles, press releases, standard operating procedures. If you have some technical, very technical document that you need for a non-technical person to understand, you can take that document, put it in there, and ask it to make it less jargony. That's a word. It is now anyway. And then, or write it for so that it would be in plain English, or you could ask it to even translate. It can write coding scripts or small programs. It can extract data from spreadsheets or just messy text. And then it can also format text into tables or other structures. So when you're asking it for tones, I talked about this earlier, you can say, write using a blank tone: conversational, lighthearted, persuasive, Spartan, formal, firm, professional, humorous. You name the tone and you can put it in there and ask it to give you your response in that tone. Format, when you're doing it, be concise, use less jargon. But again, if you have a document that has a lot of jargon in it, you can ask it to change that jargon into less jargon. I guess not what I wanted to say, but anyway. So you can also tell it to give you outputs as bullet points rather than paragraphs. You can tell it to give you something in a certain number of words. You can ask it to output as a table. And if that's the case, think about doing rubrics. So you could ask it to create a rubric and show you and create a table for you. And then you could actually take that table and put it into Canvas. There's also a way to have it create a quiz. And then you can actually take that quiz and we'll call that level 2 AI, and get that quiz into Canvas from ChatGPT. So moving on. So these are links. So the first one is called Prompt Hero. And I think do I have this open? If I don't, I will open it. Okay. Prompt Hero will help you figure out prompts specifically for images. The next one, which is Snack Prompt, and I'm going to show you that one.
Paige, we're still seeing your slides,
I know.
I think. Okay.
It's not loading. Chrome is being super slow. So I let you look at the pretty pictures before, other than my white screen. All right, here's Snack Prompt. So if you notice at the top, you have categories. And again, you can click on these And it's going to tell you, could you help me analyze my project expenses over the past blank? I'm particularly interested in identifying potential areas of cost reduction. So you can copy to ChatGPT straight from here, or you can just copy the prompt, or you can, and now this says Bard, but again, we already know that changed. So this is a way for you to, you can edit the text by typing over here in this, and then you can copy the prompt directly into whatever LLM you choose to copy it into. But I'm going to go back real quick. And I'll click on academics. Your job is to, anyhow, this is a way to get prompts without you having to create them. So this is kind of, it's a prompt library, for lack of a better term. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of prompts here. Notice that there is learn anything, make ChatGPT the most advanced resume optimizer ever, complete a book with a subchapter, develop a calorie calculator. All of these are prompts that you can copy and then do whatever the task is that you see listed. Again, that's called Snack Prompt. And again, I'm going to give you a copy of the slides as well. And the other one that I'm going to show you is, hold on. It's loading on the wrong page, wrong screen, which figures. So this is a prompt library for educators specifically from a company called AI4Education.io. And you can see that there are just different categories. There are special needs, there are assessments, rubrics, quizzes. Use ChatGPT to create slide content for your classroom instruction, email responses, newsletters, reference letters for students, language learning practice partner, lesson planning, professional development, and all of these are prompts in this library. And if you click on any of these, you will be able to see the prompt and then copy it and make it your own. So, and wrapping up here, thinking about prompt engineering. So if you've learned anything today, being very specific and very precise leads to better results from the LLM. Also, the contextual clues that you put within your prompt are what's going to enhance the AI's understanding. And then also getting in that feedback loop of continually speaking to the LLM so that you constantly are refining whatever the results is that it gives you. So define your specific goals, craft your details. You can establish your tone, ask it to give it to you in a specific tone. You can also try to use descriptive language as well as evaluating whatever you're getting back from the LLM and making sure that it is what you want. And if it's not, then you can ask it to redo it and specifically change certain parts of it. You can ask it to provide you details based on, if you asked it to give you a set of tasks, you can ask it to break those tasks down into smaller steps. Again, you can also ask it to provide you maybe some open-ended questions based on your content if you want to think about using those for maybe discussion boards, or you think about, again, finding your kind of finding your own groove in whatever it is you're asking the AI to give you is kind of key. And then also spending some time just putting in prompts just to see whatever it gives you based on what you're giving it. And I think that's key because right now, it's kind of the wild, wild west. So there's really kind of like, it's very few rules. So just kind of, again, play. This sheet that you see now is a prompt principle for instructions. And this notice number 1 says you don't need to be polite. So you don't have to say please and thank you. And if you don't mind, break down and you can, so when I give you these, you can kind of look through and you can see that like number 9 says, incorporate the following phrases. Your task is, and you must. So you're not giving, you're making sure that you tell it that it needs to complete the task that you're asking it for. Now I will also tell you that there's some really funny things going on, and I've read about that. They said to the LLM, we'll pay you more money if you give us a better answer. And actually it did provide a better answer, even though there's actually technically no money involved to the LLM. So, again, this is just a sheet that has some information on it. And I'm going to give you the next one, which is, maybe I'm not. There we go. This was actually written by OpenAI. It's telling you, first of all, here it says, write clear instructions. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. And then it says why and the tactics to do that. Provide a reference list. And then again, it's giving you specific things and some information. Split complex tasks. And then the tactics. Give the model time to think. Sometimes you do need to give it a second, and you can also tell it to just take a breath before you actually ask it to give you a response. Use external tools, and then test changes systematically. So again, I'm not going to read all this to you. I'm going to give you the slides in just a moment. So in the past hour, I've talked more than I really wanted to, but that's really not a surprise. So the magic wand of clarity. So just like a spell, your prompts need to be clear and so precise. And remember, AI is a very literal genie. It gives you exactly what you ask for, so ask wisely. Conjuring creativity. Again, if you can ask it to do something and you might end up with a poetic recipe for spaghetti instead of a business proposal. So be very cautious, and you can also be very creative. You can ask it to write you a rap. You could ask it to write you a poem. It could ask you could ask it to rap something for as an announcement for whatever reason. And then you can take that and put it in a different AI and it'll create a rap. Anyway, dancing with details. Balance is key. Too few details. And the AI will take you on a wild goose chase. Too many, and you might miss the magic of the AI's creative flair. So, potion of iteration. Mix, try, and mix again. Again, don't be afraid to try things and try different LLMs. The spell book of scenarios, keep a collection of your most enchanting prompts. Make sure you do save your prompts somewhere. There are tools that you can use to save those prompts. One of which is, oh, I'm going to forget the name of it. I just Max AI, Max, I don't know, I have to look, that you can save your prompts so that you don't ever forget them. I have a whole list of prompts that I've saved. And then humor and humanity. Remember, AI has a sense of humor too. Don't shy away from adding a touch of personality about yourself or a dash of humor for any of your prompts. And the last thing is, with great power comes great response prompting. So I hope this session has been very helpful to you. It is 10 o'clock. And so I'm going to take a hot minute, a break, and we will see you all in about 5 minutes.
Thanks, Paige.